The second speaker is Ed Smith. It was a paper written by himself and also his colleague Mauro Ugolini from the University in Rome. What is the future for media in the post-information age? You will all agree with me that social media drastically changed our daily life. Not only young people can't live without it anymore, but also someone older. The older generation is using also the social media for pleasure, but also for business. We find it most of the time a fantastic advantage, but I have to admit that personally it gets sometimes also on my nerves. This presentation will address the topic area of social media. Where next? The presenters will look at the impact of social media on the overall future of media use, given social media's role in exchanging opinions, and will allow to understand and manage the changes in the media market, with an emphasis on preserving and boosting competitiveness. Furthermore, it will set key changes in the context of broader changes in technology and society. The paper was written by two people. Both of them are FITCE board members. Edward retired from BT in May 2016, but remains involved as a research fellow, with his main research area being network modeling, telecommunications history, and the development of new ICT telecommunications propositions. He partners with researchers in the UK and Italy on a range of subjects. Over the last 15 years, he has published papers on a wide variety of topics, including ICT solution performance, ICT solutions, the introduction of new technology, and telecommunications history. He is a regular contributor of ITP and FITCE publications. In his professional life, he has worked with major clients across a wide range of technologies. He holds a BSc and PhD degrees from the University of Leicester and a postgraduate certificate in commercial management from the Montfort University. And among many memberships and responsibilities in ICT organizations, I already mentioned he is the UK board member of FITCE. Ed, please.
Thank you for the introduction, Jose. I really want to ask a question with respect to what are the key technologies. And to be honest, you've seen most of them in some detail. But are we concerned with their impact and how it's going to drive the industry in its entirety? What I'm hoping this will do is actually give you a bit more perspective on a lot of the material you've already seen and will see in the future. So I'm particularly interested in how they drive value chains and how these views will shape the market and society. So this is the roadmap of where I'm going to take you. The little circles you'll see at the top of the slides, which will tell you where we are. And we'll start by really considering what is the post-information age. Oops, no we won't. We'll start with the driver for media innovation. And here we see media in a pivotal place. It does a lot about telling society what it is and who individuals are, but it also has a lot of external pressures. Pressures from the political regime, from industrial areas, and it's subject to change due to various innovations that can change what's possible and how that will impact us. We've previously seen a range or a link between changes in the economic cycle and the changes in innovation cycle. The two are linked, and technology tends to operate on 45 to 60 year cycles, and we believe that we're at a pivotal point where we've hit a change from the information age to the post-information age, where we believe that artificial intelligence will be a lead technology in how we move forward. Now that will be coupled with many of the technologies you've already seen. And key to this will be how it drives interaction with the customer, but also the interaction with a market that is willing to pay for the content we see. And advertising becomes a very big part of this. And hence one of the key areas where you see artificial intelligence and big data and analytics is how the likes of Google and Facebook will process user information to build together personalized, targeted advertising. This makes it more effective and cheaper. All of these things are encouraged by what makes the media much more attractive, and that's ease of access, the exciting possibilities offered by virtual reality and augmented reality, which you've already seen, the clarity and the wonder that we see generated by high dynamic range and ultra high definition, as were described earlier. Now, this is a communications talk, and you wouldn't expect one of those to happen without mention of the term convergence. And convergence always we take to mean many things, and this is really about the convergence of commercial entities, corporations, content and computers all on the entertainment industry. And this is made possible by things like how quickly digital media is becoming available, how it's displayed to us and when it's displayed, so distribution windows, how that's controlled and how organizations leverage that, how the audience as a result has more opportunities and fragments, and how we see the industry becoming global and how it's consolidating and changing. And some of these themes will be familiar. We see media firms in three forms really. Those that look like something you see on the high street but in the virtual world. Those that sell you a subscription service, the Netflix and so on. And those that really don't exist in the physical world but are made possible by the virtual world. And all of these have an opportunity to grow their revenues through advertising. So let's take a look at technologies and particularly the role of social media. We see that the media covers a very wide spectrum of activity, and sat in the middle of that is social media and search. Why are they important? First of all, because they are the things you interact with more, the platform that you give more input to rather than just receive from. Therefore they know much more about you, therefore they can use that knowledge about you to create targeted advertising. They'll never get to this nirvana of a market segment of one, but they'll get closer to it than they ever imagined possible. And the great thing about social media is not only is it a jumping off point for the other industries, but it's where people exchange their views on other activities. And they also add a social element to the more solitary element of viewing and engaging with the media. We look at how these things will turn the experience into money. So on the top row you will see the technologies. On the bottom row you see where they make their money, and the consumer and the big platforms of social media and online entertainment in the middle. And online entertainment gets a lot of revenue from advertising, but also gets a lot from syndication, licensing content, rental of content, and subscription services. So it's a wider way of paying for media than we've seen before. Big data and analytics provide the means of bringing in that revenue, and that gives social media a very key position. And both online and social media can make use of all the other technical innovations that actually tell you more about your customer and enrich the experience for your customer. So how does that impact the value chain? Let's look at the value chain. It starts with advertisers on the left and consumers on the right. And revenue flows from both ends into the middle. Publishers have an anchor role in orchestrating the user experience. So publishers can be anything from BBC, Netflix, even Facebook, and they pay all of the value chain downstream of them and collect revenue from the advertisers. We see also the delivery mechanism that may look a bit anomalous. That is typically an ISP, and that will be paid for by both the consumer and the publisher. Underneath, there are many of the companies we've seen today who are actually selling into the publisher market and the production market, people who make use of the technology. So it's a rich market. Looking at it in more detail, perhaps we want to look at the strength of those providers and how they control the value chain. So consumers are obviously very important. What they decide to do en masse has a very big impact. As individuals, they have somewhat less impact, but they have a tremendous influence on each other. Advertisers also have a huge impact. If you have no advertising, then your revenue streams are cut quite substantially. And obviously the publishers, who are big orchestrators, have a huge impact. On the other hand, artists and authors tend to have less impact, except in the specific case where the artist or author is a very big name and therefore an audience attractor in their own right. We've looked at this in a little more from a different angle by using Porter's 5 forces, and we see lots of new entrants, including telecommunications companies, entering the media industry to increase their own longevity and increase their revenues. We actually see that the buyer has a lot of power, but that power is exercised through diluting output and having lots of different commercial ways of interfacing of how they pay for consumption. And we do see substitutes. So not only are we seeing subscription television and streaming services coming into the market, but we're also seeing a role for amateur content. So amateur content is not paid for, it's not necessarily of the highest quality, but it actually takes away viewing time, that is eyeball seconds, away from the main media. And it actually dilutes revenues to the initial producers of programs, particularly authors and artists. This makes the point of where advertising is going. Yesterday we saw that an awful lot of revenue, or advertising revenues, have left newspapers and digital. newspapers and consumer magazines. So back in 2009, they were collecting 29% of the advertising revenue. Today, that is down to 13%. The digital channels have gone from 17% to 39% of that. Television itself has been surprisingly stable, around about the 37% mark. However, that could change very easily as media changes. So how does that impact the money flow? Well, advertising is important, but it's not the only source of revenue. Having said that, Facebook has sucked up $27 million worth of advertising revenue that the Guardian newspaper thought they'd generate through their online version. That's a big hole, particularly considering how respected the Guardian is as a source of news. Google and Facebook have a lot of power in the marketplace, so much so that they can charge a premium for their advertising. So advertising costs in general go down with digital media, but the slice of that Facebook and Google can take is at higher prices. Authors face a lot more content, a lot more competition for content, so they're less well rewarded. It's harder to break in. So we see generally at the artistic side it could suffer, and particularly in investment. So as more of the revenue flows towards the likes of Google, YouTube and Facebook, who don't invest in the production of content, that flows away from people who do invest in the production of new content, which will obviously have consequences for the market. It's complicated, so can we apply modelling to look at it? The answer is we can, and there are a number of fairly well-known modelling techniques that can be used. So you can use something like agent-based modelling to look at how the various actors in a market interact. You can look at pricing strategies against reward strategies using things like the Nash equilibrium, which is a component of game theory, which homes in on an optimal solution as far as price and benefit goes. Lagrangian multipliers, which is constraint-based modelling, and a thing called landscape theory, which allows you to take a look at various consortium and look at which are stable, which are likely to interact well with each other. Now we've seen this used for a particular set of applications by an Italian author, Di Pianura, who's looked at modelling the digital magazine market, which compared to the video market you might think is quite a retrospective step, but actually this is looking at them going into the digital magazine market and what challenges do they face and how much money can they spend, what proportion of their money should they invest in the digital market, how does entering the digital market cannibalise their existing product, all of those kind of questions. You can also look at, suppose I want to add a new viewing device as to how I distribute printed word media. What's the impact of early adopters? Most importantly, when I enter a new market, how do I maximise my product? Maximise my profit. So these are key things that can be modelled, and the tools exist today for doing that. So how is this impacting on the market structure? You've heard a lot of this already, but we see the effect of time shifting, people not looking at live TV, how it balances as a communal activity, and what drives choice. As the market fragments, it's harder for producers to understand what's happening and why. We see much more stream services. And most importantly, we see people doing two things at once. They're watching the TV, they're on social media, and they're exchanging opinions on products, on what's going on the screen, and influencing other people in their engagement with the media. We're seeing changes in the device and changes in the industry, lots of consolidation. So AT&T are looking at buying Time Warner, and Fox/Disney and Comcast are vying for control of Sky. And all the time we're seeing broadcast TV revenues declining as on-demand grows. So we see lots of competition, but we see partnership as well. And people looking for synergistic relationships. So Airbnb using a directory service like Craigslist to publicise what they're doing. The weather company offering an API into their service so that your store can decide whether today it's going to push its advertising out on its ice cream or on its raincoats. Marriott using Spotify services to set the mood in their hotels. We're seeing much more use of syndication. Regular broadcasters moving into owning YouTube channels financed by advertising. And if Lawrence is in the room, he had a very different view of the relationship between Comcast and Netflix, which is here displayed as very synergistic. He gave it as quite adversarial. So regulation's important. We actually believe that we've been very slow to understand what's happening, and therefore using regulation to help govern what's going on. Why do we say that? We've seen this slide of ethical considerations, the work of some social science researchers that are asking questions like, what are the journalistic qualities we see? How is information presented? Is it presented honestly? Is market power being abused? Are we allowing people freedom of speech? How does that impact what they think? How are we controlling hate speech? Is advertising establishing social norms? Some of these are quite old questions, but they're asking what kind of world do we want? So the machine's hopefully rocketing me to my conclusions almost on 20 minutes. So social media, we think, is the focus. We think certainly the technologies we identified seem to be very much the technologies that have been discussed at this conference, which is good news. Point I didn't really make in the main body is a lot of the changes this industry is seeing, we've kind of seen already in telecoms. So the consolidation, the changes in media format, the players in the market, all of those things. Competition and cooperation are going to be important. Modelling can help, and regulation is late and important. Thank you very much.